Welcome back to David Galata Book Dreamer. I'm David Galata and I'm your host, and I'm glad you're watching this today. I wasn't here last week because of a major project which is now complete, so I'm back. It was suggested to me by several people that it might be nice for me to read excerpts from my books here on YouTube. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Just a few pages so you can get an idea for my writing style and also so you can get a little bit of a hint as to what the audiobooks are going to sound like. Now, I might be clearing my throat. I might get a little coffee here and there. Those types of things will be edited out of the audiobook. I assure you, I have some very good techs working on that right now. I'm going to be doing the books in published order. So we're starting with the first book, Crew of Ganges. And there's the ship, which is 500 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide, and is a generation ship whose mission is terraforming. Now, I'm going to just go into towards the beginning of the book. I don't want to give too much away. And I found a fun little scene with some of the main characters all together. And I'm just going to be reading this one aloud to you and, let me know what you think. I'd really like to know. If you're interested, this book is available on Amazon. It's available in print and ebook. It's also available at the C. Simpson used bookshop in her local author's bookshelf at the West End Plaza in Broadheadsville, Pennsylvania. So if you want to check these out, let me know. If you'd like to buy a signed copy from myself directly, contact me, direct message me, and let me know that that's what you'd like. And we'll make arrangements. So, there we go. That's easy enough. Let's begin. Crew of Ganges. And just so you know, this is from Chapter 5. Residence Wheel 1, Level 3. Captain-elect Jake Vergstrom groaned as he collapsed back to the blue-padded surface of the gymnasium floor and let out a moan of pain. "You're killing me!" he exclaimed loudly, as he rolled onto his back, releasing the hand weights he had been holding on to the floor while doing push-ups. His wrists felt as though they were on fire. Both his arms were rubbery with exertion. Jake looked over at his fitness instructor, whose heavily muscled body barely fit the exercise outfit he was wearing, and complained to him. "Really, this hurts! Why do I have to suddenly work out like I'm getting ready for an athletic competition?" Jake dared himself to look up at Merrick's darkly glowering face. The imposing bodyguard crossed his arms across his massive chest and replied, "This is so you won't collapse after your self-defense lessons. Now, get up and give me 10 laps around the mat. Now!" Merrick roared this last instruction loud enough for his words to echo in the disc-shaped gymnasium. The structure was 30 meters in diameter, with floor-to-ceiling windows curving around the gym in a full circle. The community parkland surrounding the building, full of manicured fields and stately trees. The regent had reserved the gymnasium for their lessons. This way, no other crew were present, except for those whom Merrick had personally invited. Jake moaned and thought about arguing, but the look on Merrick's bearded face told him that to do so would be to incur the wrath of his new mentor. He pulled himself up, sweat soaking his gym outfit, and began to jog around the interior perimeter of the gymnasium. The central area of the chamber was filled with weightlifting equipment, treadmills, and other intricate machines designed to build and tone muscles, plus the entrance lift tube right in the middle of the room. To his own dismay, Merrick seemed to prefer the free weights and doing laps around the building. Lots and lots of laps around the building. Jake was afraid that he was going to lose his mind if his body didn't fully collapse on him first. When he finally dragged himself to the finish of his run, Merrick indicated that Jake should sit for a while on one of the many padded benches set just outside the perimeter. Gratefully, the captain-elect sat down and began to pour water down his throat from a bottle that he had brought for this purpose. Merrick scolded him. "Sip it. Don't gulp it down. Just wait until your new survival training. You'll appreciate water then. Slowly quench your thirst. It's better for your body, and believe me, right now, you don't want a belly full of water. Jake gave his new mentor a sour look, but slowed his drinking and began to relax his sore muscles. He looked up at his bodyguard and said, "This is much harder than my basic crew training. Why do we have to push so hard? What is this for?" Marek's expression softened a touch as he walked over to him and replied with a stern yet calm voice, "The Regent has tasked me with preparing you for anything, including defending yourself and surviving on your own. It turns out I agree with the man. As captain, you should be an example for all crew, strong in mind, body, and purpose. Once you can discipline and lead yourself, you can begin to show the way to others." Wisdom from a bodyguard. Jake sighed deeply as he put the half-empty water bottle down and said, "You know, Marek, you should have been a drill instructor. You'd be good at it." The former rattler made a non-committal noise and spoke into his calm bead. "He's about ready. Let's begin the introduction." Jake's head snapped up sharply at hearing this, and he asked, "Who's coming?" Marek gave him a wicked, lopsided grin. "Your new self-defense instructor." Jake blinked at this revelation. He had assumed that Marek would be teaching him that sort of thing. After all, the man was an experienced bodyguard and formerly a rattler chief. He could not imagine who the big rattler had hired for this task and found himself filled with trepidation. The lift platform at the center of the gym gave off a chime as the elevator arrived at their floor. The clean, mirrored doors opened, and Jake almost fell off his bench in surprise at the crew member who emerged from within. The most stunning woman Jake had ever seen sauntered from the lift. Every step she took was graceful and measured. Each glance took in every detail. He found himself being assessed. And he wasn't sure if he liked the feeling. Her bright red hair was wrapped around her head like a crown of flaming braids. Her eyes were like a hawk's and seemed to be illuminated from within. She wore a red gym outfit which showed every curve of her fit, athletic body. There was also a medical sector symbol embossed on the front of her outfit. In her hand was nothing more than a white towel, which she slung over her shoulder with a nod to Marek. Jake called out to her with a wide grin on his face, "Well, hello, lovely. I'm afraid this area is reserved, though I don't see why we can't make an exception for beauty." The woman scowled at him as she continued to walk directly to Marek, placing her arms about the big man's neck, and kissed him briefly. The young captain-elect almost groaned aloud as he realized that she had come here to see Marek. He should have known better, but it did seem strange to him that his bodyguard would bend the rules this way. Their training sessions were supposed to be free of personal distractions. As the woman stepped away from Marek, she returned to staring at Jake while holding her towel loosely in her hands. He looked over to his bodyguard, who coughed lightly into his right fist and stated, "Captain-elect Jake Vergstrom, I am pleased to introduce you to your self-defense instructor, Chief Lifeguard Talianando." The young man could feel his jaw drop open in surprise. He could not stop his mouth from moving on its own accord. "What? You mean a lifeguard is my instructor in defense? I don't understand." The woman reached out and placed a hand upon Marek's broad chest. She calmly walked over to Jake, piercing him with her eyes. "Get up," she commanded, and Jake carefully rose from his seat. Before he knew what was happening, she spun around, and her bare foot snapped across his face. She drooped into a crouch and swept out her other leg, catching his ankles and sending him spinning to the ground as she pulled upward. He slammed hard into the mat, winded and confused. A bare foot rested itself upon the nape of his neck. He heard her voice, sultry and cold at the same time. "You should be grateful I am a bodyguard. That way, when I break you, I can put you back together." The foot on his neck lifted, and he gingerly turned over to see her slap Marek on his backside as she placed her towel on the nearby bench. His bodyguard raised an eyebrow at him, grinning like a wolf. Jake felt his face flush red with embarrassment. No need to check his flash tats to see how he was feeling. His ears rang and burned all at once. Jake rose slowly to his feet, which were feeling very unsteady. He was certain that Marek's girlfriend was going to beat him to a pulp unless he could stop her. The real problem was, he had no idea as to how he would accomplish this. Taylor approached him and Jake flinched, raising his hands to ward off any further blows. She said to him in a serious tone, "It is obvious that you have not been practicing what you were taught during basic, so we are going to begin with teaching you how to fall properly, all over again. Oh, and if you feel any further desire to be flirtatious, I will test your abilities in a contest with your bodyguard." Jake swung his head toward Marek, who looked at him with a very cold expression on his bearded face. Taylor snapped her fingers at Jake, bringing his attention back to herself, and said, "You will take these lessons seriously, captain-elect or not. Your reputation is not unknown amongst the crew, and very few of us are amused. Our lives and the holy mission are at stake in your hands now. Show me that you can act like a responsible crewman, and maybe some rotation, I'll be glad to call you captain." Jake bowed his head and nodded his agreement. His own self-assessment was that he was a spoiled brat who never took his life or the lives of anyone else seriously. Without further ado, they began practicing falls in simple blocks, with Marek joining in at Taylor's request from time to time. It turned out that Jake knew far less about falling safely than he had ever imagined possible. Taylor was coolly professional, harsh, and aggressive, yet she had a well of patience that impressed him deeply. By the end of the session, he found that he wanted to learn more, and this filled him with wonder. At this point, he felt like a groundhog which had been thrown about by a pair of tigers. Jake also knew that he felt like he wanted to be as skilled as these two crew were with all his heart. As they started cleaning up the area, Jake approached Taylor, giving her a respectful bow of the head before asking, "Where did you learn how to do this so proficiently? I don't recall any of my early training ever covering this material in such depth." Taylor paused for a moment and glanced back at Marek before responding. "When I was just a student, I found a love for medicine and athletics. It was a bit of an odd combination, and I was determined to be able to do both of them equally well. I was practicing triage for the school's gymnastic festival several spirals ago, as a nurse's apprentice, when I helped a very young student from a visiting community group who had broken her arm during the competitions at the festival. The hospital staff said I did a good job with the triage, and it helped to save her arm. As it turned out, she was the daughter of the council to Captain Higashi himself. In gratitude, he allowed me to train at their household dojo. It was quite intense, challenging, and very rewarding. His daughter's name was Asha Higashi, and I encouraged her to keep on going with her own gymnastic training. We kept in touch until she started a duty program in therapeutic services. At that point, we were both very busy, and we lost touch. I still practice almost every single rotation. Marek has been a great sparring partner for me, very challenging and unconventional." Jake looked over at his mentor bodyguard, who was toweling off and changing his clothes. The man's torso was covered in various tattoos and several nasty scars, which must have been caused by very serious wounds. He glanced back over at Taylor to find her watching Marek with a predatory look. When he was finished, Marek walked over to Taylor and kissed her, saying, "Okay, babe, I gotta get His Highness here to the bridge by next slice. See you for dinner?" She pulled the big man in a hug and bit his neck lightly. "Wouldn't miss it. A dance afterward?" Marek smiled broadly down at her with gleaming eyes, nodded his agreement, and disentangled himself from her arms. He grabbed Jake by the shoulder. "Come along, sir. Time to clean you up," and marched the captain-elect to the awaiting lift, then out of the gymnasium. Jake was still dazed by the events of his first slice of the rotation. Every single part of his body hurt. His legs were still shaky under him. He let Marek guide him along to his own private transportation pod. Jake passively allowed his bodyguard to strap him into the passenger seat and stared out the windshield as Marek slid behind the controls. The pod quietly came to life after Marek pressed in the key code, and the big man seemed to sigh in disappointment. "I'm really sorry, Marek," Jake said, finally turning to face his new mentor. Marek glanced at him and said, "For what?" Jake dropped his eyes and sighed. "For messing up, for being a jerk in front of your girlfriend, for being unprepared and childish. I know you're disappointed with me, and I don't blame you." Marek watched him for a moment, scratching the side of his beard, then said, "The only disappointment I felt this slice so far is that every time I turn this joke of a vehicle on, it barely makes a sound. I miss the roar of a badly tuned thruster. I always feel like I'm driving a child's toy in this thing. As for your apologies, I accept them with the condition that you show me that you'll embrace what you learned from these experiences." Jake looked at the big man, who grinned at him with a twinkle in his eyes as he continued. "And in terms of apologizing about Taily, my captain, if you wish to apologize to my mate, you can always address her yourself. I found it all very amusing, and I was quite entertained." Marek then raised his eyebrows at Jake and pressed the accelerator hard to full throttle. They swept up swiftly at a sharp angle, and Jake grabbed at his armrest, certain that he was leaving permanent hand marks where he clutched. Marek shook his head and exclaimed, "Ganges, help me! This thing wallows around like a stuffed pig. I don't know why there aren't more serious accidents with folks driving these damn things. Slow controls, soft steering, slow on the uptake, they're a hazard." Jake's eyes were wide as they swooped around other vehicles, heading for the capward end bulkhead to Residence Wheel 1, which contained his family's estates. Warning lights appeared on the front panel of the pod, which Marek turned off with a blistering curse. Naga's voice cut through the air from the forward display of the dashboard. "You are traveling beyond safety-regulated speeds. Please reduce your velocity." Marek cocked his head to one side, pursed his lips, and said, "My dear Naga, perhaps you should input my skills as an accomplished pilot, certified in most types of transport, and a very experienced driver before you go on making backseat comments." The pod was silent, save for the rushing of the air flowing past them and the occasional sounds of vehicle warning horns blaring off in the distance as they rushed by. Jake waited for a return comment from Naga. The AI was known for its pithy remarks and infallible logic, which it used to make its point of view known. Jake had never won an argument with Naga before, and as far as he knew, none of his friends had either. There was still no reply, and Marek nodded to himself, then cut the speed back just a touch, though still far above safety regulations. His mentor winked at Jake and said, "Gotta show I'm still working hard on my reprogramming." Marek then corkscrewed around a much slower-moving produce transport, making Jake squeeze his armrest even harder. And there we go. So that was a snippet from Crew of Ganges. I hope you enjoyed that. And I will be doing more little pieces from my work next week. I'll be doing Clockmaker. So hope to see you then. Please do leave comments below. I would really love that. I would love to hear from all of you. And I really, really hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. I'll see you next week.